In one of Aesop's fables, there's a great contest between the sun and the wind. They're arguing with each other. Who is the stronger? Well, they saw a man walking on the street, which is out in the country, and he had a coat on, and they said, well, you know how we can resolve this? The first one to be able to get his coat off wins. Whoever gets his coat off wins, and we'll know that is the stronger of the forces. So the wind decided to go first. So the wind started blowing. And as the wind started to blow, the man hunched forward a little bit. And as the wind grew stronger, the man clutched his coat about him even more and hunkered down into the wind. And the wind blew as hard as the wind could, and the man just took that coat and wrapped it even tighter yet and hunkered down even more. When the sun said, it's my turn now. So the wind stopped blowing and the man stood up. Well, the sun came out and gently threw rays of warmth at this man, and as he went along, he started to perspire a little bit on his forehead, and the sun a little bit more, a little warmer, and the man loosened his tie. And the sun beat a little bit warmer yet, and as the man unbuttoned his jacket, and the sun kept going and going, a little bit more, and soon the man had no choice but to take his jacket off and throw it over his shoulder. And so we know who the winner was. Who was the stronger? It was by gentle persistence that this man was able to take his coat off, not by force. And that's a little countercultural to us, because we see power as force oftentimes. We don't see power of Jesus being something gentle and persistent. We see in the news from before these, I've mentioned before in Egypt, especially when I think of this, I think of Egypt and the peaceful protesting that's going on, the nonviolent resistance that went on, that overthrew the leader eventually. And if you read in history, there probably more got done through nonviolent resistance than armed force in the world to make change happen. It's this persistence. You know, you've got something that you do. You persist at it. You know it's important. Whatever it is, you persist at it. You keep doing it year after year, although sometimes it doesn't seem to produce any fruit. People may not be as attentive or attend as much as you think they should. Only a few show up, but yet these few are touched in many different ways. Sometimes we give up too easily. We try for a couple of times and say it's just not worth it anymore. No one seems to care. But if it's important, you keep at it. And eventually, with time, people will see that this is worthwhile. This is really valuable. This is something that they should be committed to. We see in the gospel, we've got the 5,000 that were cured, that were fed, and we've got the 4,000 coming up in the next section of Matthew. We've got all these people being fed. One way or another, Jesus fed them. At the end of the 5,000 feeding, or 15,000, or how many people, there were how many baskets left? 12. Of all the crumbs that were sitting left over, after feeding of the 4,000 plus, there were 7 baskets of crumbs left over. That's interesting. Think about that. Take you now to Jesus. Jesus walking with the disciples after feeding the 5,000 and doing a few other things, goes outside of Israel into Canaan. What used to be Canaan now is Phoenicia. Why is he going to that country? What purpose does he have going in some foreign land that are known enemies of the Israelites? He's going to Tyre and Sidon on the coast. He's heading that direction for whatever reason we're assuming. Well, I don't know. But on the way, he meets a woman who keeps bugging him. What do you want with me? She wants crumbs. Do you remember in the 1980s, or 1980, is remarkable. Do you remember Team USA, the hockey team that played the Russians? A bunch of all-stars, college kids on a hockey team. Team USA playing the Russians, who were probably the best team in the world. And so happens that the USA beat the Russians. But throughout this stands, you could hear USA, 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 a sense of collective nationalism, supporting our team, the underdogs who weren't expected to even place in the Olympic Games that year. But somehow they seemed to prevail over the number one rated over the last 5 Olympics, Team Russia, Team USSR. We have a sense of this is who we are, this is our country, this is our identity, USA. And that's important to have that identity. I'm sure the disciples could think of the same thing, Israel, Israel, as Jesus is walking through this land of Canaan. The enemies, not sure what to expect. They had their sense of, we're God's people, and we're protected because God's hand is upon us, and always has been. From day one, we're God's chosen people. A few years ago, the shuttle going out into outer space took leaders, some people from other countries with them. An interesting observation was made that as soon as the shuttle passed through Earth's atmosphere, the people from different countries would identify their country. There's my country. There's Saudi Arabia. There's Australia. There's whatever country. And as the time went on, then they said, that's our continent right there. That's Asia. That's Europe. That's Africa. And so on and so forth. And a couple of days later, they said, this is our Earth. So they went from country to continent to world as they're leaving the Earth's atmosphere and going out to the moon or wherever they were going. They got a sense of a broader scope of life on Earth. Earth was one place where many people were living. At some point we will get out of and we're doing this with technology and other things, we're getting out of our own space and expanding our vision to other countries, to other worlds, seeming like other worlds to us. And we're not only focused on USA, we're focused on world. Now with our economy going to AA+, and we're looking France maybe next. And what other countries are going to be in the same boat that we are? And we're having talks with China now about how we can stimulate each other's economies and those kinds of things. We're talking more to other people in other worlds. I shouldn't say other worlds, other countries. We're expanding our borders. As Jesus is walking, this woman persists. Help my child, my daughter is possessed by demons. Help her. And of course, Jesus walks on without even paying any attention to her at all. And the disciples, again, are ready to dismiss her, just like they were ready to dismiss the crowds, before Jesus said, you feed them. And now they're saying, Jesus, she's just a pain in our side. Get rid of her. She has no business being part of this. Although that was her country and she had every right to be there. And she keeps persisting and keeps after him. And finally, Jesus relents. But Jesus gives the cry of, I was here for the lost sheep of Israel. And the disciples, you can hear them say, Israel, Israel, Israel. And they're all for it because this is our man, this is Jesus, this is the one who's saving us, and this is our boy. But then he takes a turn and he actually listens to her, and they're saying, wait a minute, you can't, what are you doing, Jesus? I can hear them saying this. What are you doing? You can't listen to her. And she kneels in all humility. She has nothing to lose. Any one of us, with our child being hurt or injured, we will do whatever it takes to get them well. It doesn't matter. We'll keep persisting until we get that child the attention he or she needs. So we can identify with this woman. And he finally relents and he tests her. He tests the disciples. He calls her a dog. forever for all intents and purposes. The food of Israel is not meant for you. God's salvation, God's grace is not meant for anybody but Israel. And she comes back with a line no one will ever forget. But yet even the dogs will take the crumbs from the table. Even the dogs will take whatever's left in these 12 baskets. Whatever's left in these 7 baskets, that is enough to feed us. What else are you going to do with it? You've got plenty, even left over. And Jesus does something which I think is very important. He takes a turn, a slight turn, and extends his own ministry to not only the lost ones of the house of Israel, but also the lost ones outside the borders of Israel. Here's a Canaanite woman, the sworn enemy. He's extending his boundaries to her. He's inviting her into his, what do you want to say? Into his house, into his family. He's expending his energy to be with her. We have a God who listens to this person who is, for all intents and purposes, invisible to society, inaudible. No one pays any attention to her. But yet, the least of these, Jesus hears, and Jesus responds, and Jesus changes his mind and is flexible enough to include her. There are crumbs everywhere. There are crumbs waiting for us. There are crumbs waiting for people out in the world who hunger for the grace and the love of God. And through this story, we find that a God who is not only rigid, but flexible, and is able to include those who really need God's grace, who really need God's love. Call upon the name of the Lord, and God is there. All this woman had to do was persist. I think it says somewhere, ask and you will receive. Persist in your prayers. God listens and relents. God changes to meet our needs. I remember watching the movie Invictus with Nelson Mandela, and he was interviewed by one of the sports commentators, and the commentator said, when you were in prison for 27 years, weren't you against the Springboks, the rugby team, South African rugby team? And as Mandela said, yes, I was, but no longer. Things have changed. I have changed. Circumstances have changed. Now I am looking at a bigger picture, a bigger vision that includes all whites and blacks and everybody in this country. Not simply the blacks, but everyone is included now. We must unite together to build a stronger nation. And Jesus is doing this too. And we'll see as we go through the gospel that Jesus continually bumps up against his boundaries and extends them out, setting an example for all of us to find out where our boundaries are and bump up against them once in a while. Bump up against and see where that leads us if we can just extend it just a little bit more. After a while, we may not need the American flag up there at all. We may have this perspective of, it's not one country, it's not one continent, it's one world. And here we are, feeding the needs of the people, as Jesus commanded us to do, feeding the world, letting them know that God lives through us. And that's a terrific responsibility, but it's a terrific honor as well. To be a sacrificial lamb, to be sacrificing ourselves for God who gives himself for us, who changes his mind to be attentive to our needs, whatever they may be. This is a God who listens. This is a God who responds to us. Let us never forget that, because it's here in the Scriptures more than one time, over and over again. God listens and God responds. Amen.